One of the most groundbreaking features introduced in Next.js 13 is support for server components. As part of that release, Next.js added 7 new server component functions that enable you to fetch data on the server and change the cache behavior, generate static pages, modify pages based on request headers and cookies, and much more. In this video, we're gonna go over all these 7 server component functions and learn how to use them in the real world by building a videos app that's gonna display a list of videos and a video detail, customize them based on your browser language, enable you to save videos for later, and more. With that, let's get started. So here I've got a fresh Next.js project created using the npx create next app command with the experimental app flag, and I also added Tailwind and related config files to get some styling done quickly. And I'm gonna change the layout file just to set some default colors and padding, and change the default page to get the page heading rendered. Our changes are working in the browser, so let's fetch some data and explore how Next.js extends the native fetch function. In order to get the list of the videos appear on the screen, we need to fetch some data from an API. Previously, you would do this via getStaticParams or getServerSideParams, or perhaps a library like React Query. In the app directory, to fetch data, we're going to use a combination of async server components together with native fetch API extended by Next.js and React. In the codebase, we're first going to define an interface for the video object. We're going to turn the component into an async component, and we're going to use the fetch function to fetch the data from the API. Then we're going to map over the videos that we've got. We're going to import link. We're going to include a link to the video detail and display the video title, author, and the number of views. We can see our code is working in the browser, but before we proceed, let's spend some time and explore the fetch function. When you use the fetch function in Next.js, you are in fact using a special fetch function extended by Next.js and React. So how exactly do React and Next.js extend the fetch API? Let's start with React. React provides automatic request deduplication. What does that mean? Let's say you have 3 components making the very same API call. With deduplication in place, React will only make one call instead. Let's shift our attention to how Next.js extends the fetch API. And it does that by letting us define how the fetch API is going to interact with a server-side cache. Natively, the cache option in the fetch function defines how a fetch request will interact with browser's HTTP cache. Next.js extends this using the cache option to define how the request will interact with server cache. Bear in mind that the fetch request occurs on the server, and also adds a special next revalidate option. Let's explore these options in more detail, as understanding this is key to understanding how data fetching works in the app directory. The first option is force cache, which is going to be the default one in most scenarios. This is similar to getStaticParams function and could be summarized as cache everything until manually invalidated. How exactly does this work? So let's say you have a user, you have Next.js cache running on server, perhaps Vercel, and an API. Let's focus on the communication between Next.js cache and an API that happens during build time. When Next.js builds your application, it will send requests to an API as it pre-renders your pages, and then it will cache the responses it receives. Once your application has been built and your Next.js instance is running, when a user visits one of the pages that uses fetch function with force cache option, Next.js will return the response from its cache without making any requests to your API. Force cache option is also the option that our fetch request that fetches the videos uses. As you can see in our API logs, Next.js fires requests as it's building the app. However, once the application is running, no API requests are being made and everything is being served from the cache. Another cache option for the fetch function is no store. This can be the default one in some scenarios, and I will talk about this later in the video. Whenever a user visits a page that uses the fetch function with the cache no store option, Next.js is going to create an API request and then it's gonna send this page to the user without storing anything in the cache. Hence, the cache no store option is kinda similar to how getServerSideProps function works in the pages directory and could be summarized as cache nothing. The final option you can provide to this special fetch function is next revalidate with the revalidation period in seconds. We'll use 60. When building your app, specifying this option is going to yield the same results as specifying cache force cache. This means that Next.js will fire API requests as it pre-renders pages using fetch function with this option in place, and it will cache the responses. What's more interesting is how your application is going to behave in runtime. The way it's going to behave is going to be different based on whether your revalidation period, in our case 60 seconds, has already elapsed or not. So before a revalidation period of 60 seconds has elapsed, Next.js is going to behave in the same way as specifying cache force cache. That means that incoming requests are going to be served directly from the Next.js cache without hitting the API. After our 60-second revalidation period has elapsed, it's going to behave slightly differently. When a user visits the page, they are still gonna get the response back from the cache. However, this response might contain stale data. What's gonna happen right after the response has been made is that Next.js is gonna query the API for fresh data, it's gonna evict the old items from the cache, and it's gonna replace it with the fresh data it just received. This way, all the subsequent requests are going to be served fresh data from the cache, and after another 60 seconds, when a request comes in, the whole background revalidation process is going to be repeated. Now that we've established a good understanding of the fetch function, we can implement the video detail page, and we're soon going to learn about generateStaticParams function. To start off, we'll create a videos folder, an ID folder in square brackets to create a dynamic route segment, and we'll create a page file. Then we'll create an interface for the video object, we'll create an async function called videoDetail, and we'll get the ID in the params prop. We'll fetch the data from an API, we'll create a link to go back to the home page, we'll display video title, video date, video author, the number of views, description of the video, and an iframe with a YouTube link and the title of the video. To verify it's working, let's click at one of the links and we end up on a video details screen. We can now build and run the project, and we'll see that the cache for fetch requests is going to behave differently for static route segments, that's our home page, and dynamic route segments, that's our video detail pages. You can see again that when I visit the home page, no requests are being fired as everything is fetched and cached during build time. But when I visit one of the video detail pages, there is a request fired as there is no server cache by default for dynamic route segments. However, for content that doesn't change very frequently, we would like to introduce caching to reduce the load on API and increase the speed of the application. Luckily for us, Next.js has a solution for this, and that's generateStaticParams function, which is kind of similar to getStaticPaths in pages directory. This function returns an array of values which Next.js feeds into the params prop while building the pages. So what we're gonna do in our code is we're gonna include the generateStaticParams function, we're gonna fetch all the videos from the API, and we're gonna return an array of objects with IDs of the videos that are gonna be used to populate the params prop. So when we now build the app, Next.js is going to iterate over the IDs that we return. So for video number 1, Next.js is going to fire a request to an API, it's gonna receive a response, and it's gonna store it in the cache, and the same goes for video number 2 and all the IDs that we returned. Consequently, when a user visits the video detail page, they're going to be served directly from the cache without hitting the API. And we can verify the statement by looking into the server logs. Next up, we've got the notFound and redirect functions, and then we're going to look into how we can personalize data based on your locale using headers and store information in cookies. So definitely stay tuned. Currently, when you try to visit a video page that doesn't exist, the page is going to crash. Fortunately, we can leverage the notFound function to provide a better user experience around that. This notFound function is kind of similar to the notFound option you could return from the getStaticParams or getServerSideParams in the pages directory. The way it works is that first you import the notFound function from Next Navigation, and then you call it when the requested resource can't be found. So in our case, when the response status is equal to 404, we call the notFound function. And we can create a custom notFound page by creating a notFound file. And in this file, we can provide more contextual information about the error, as well as a link back to the home page. And you can see that if you try to visit a non-existing page now, we're gonna get a custom notFound page, and we can recover from the error. A function that's low-key similar to the notFound function is a redirect function, and you can think of it as an equivalent to the redirect option in getStaticParams or getServerSideParams in pages directory. So let's say we've got some private videos on our page and we want to redirect users to a custom not authorized page when they try to view them. In order to do that, let's import the redirect function from Next Navigation and call this function when the response status is 403 and we want to redirect our users to videos/not-authorized page. And lastly, let's create a not authorized page. As a side note, it's worth mentioning that not authorized isn't any Next.js file convention, and we could have named the page in a totally different way. That said, let's include some information about the error and a link back to the home page. And we can see that when we try to visit one of the videos that we're not authorized to view, we're gonna get this specific error page. So let's now finally use headers and cookies to personalize data and store information. Right now, the videos page is completely static and is the same for every user. So let's personalize it. What we want to do is that we want to display videos from different languages based on the accept language header. To be more specific, we want to look into the HTTP headers object. We want to read the accept language header, and then we want to use this to parameterize the requests we send to our API to fetch the list of the videos. To read the request headers, we can use the headers function from Next.js. This function extends the native web headers API and is currently read-only. In our code, we are going to import the headers function, and then we're going to get the language as headers.getAcceptLanguage, and due to the format of the accept language header, we are going to split it into substrings with a comma separator, and we're going to grab the first item. Next, we're going to define a query, so if the language exists, we are going to set language to language, and if it doesn't exist, we are going to set it to an empty string. And finally, we are going to include the query at the end of the URL. If you view the page and refresh it, nothing should change, as long as your browser is in English. But if I set it to Spanish using this add-on, you can see that as soon as I do that, I'm gonna get Spanish videos alongside the English ones. Using functions like headers or cookies comes with a small caveat. That is, that it will make your fetch functions behave like as if you set a cache to no store. That's because the information about incoming HTTP requests can't be known at build time. This means that incoming requests are going to hit the API and aren't going to get cached. Finally, we want to give our users option to store videos they want to watch later. To do that, we are going to use the cookies function from Next.js. Currently, the cookies function is read-only, but Next.js is looking to add write capability. That means that now we either have to manually set a cookie, which can be cumbersome, or use a third-party library. So let's create a watch later button, which is going to set watch later cookie for a given video. Our button needs to be a client component, as we are going to use browser-specific APIs like event handlers. Next, we're gonna define the component. We're gonna get video ID in the props, and we're gonna define the HTML and CSS for the component. Next up, we want to define our event handler. And in this event handler, we're gonna prevent the default event. And then we're gonna define the cookie. And as I said, we need to do this manually. So we set the watch later cookie to true with the video ID. We're gonna set the cookie path, the expiration date for 1 year, and we're gonna set document cookie to the cookie we just created. Finally, we need to import useRouter from Next Navigation, use the useRouter hook, and we are going to call router.refresh, which is going to rerun the entire page on the server with the cookie that we just created. Then, in the main videos page, we are going to import the cookies function from Next headers. We're going to import the watch later button we just created, and then we're going to set the next cookies variable to cookies. And if the watch later cookie exists for this video ID, we want to return a string saying added to watch later, because this video has been already added to the watch later list. And if it hasn't been added yet, we are going to display the watch later button instead. If I now visit the videos page, you can see all the watch later buttons, and as soon as I'm gonna click one of them, it's gonna tell me that I added a video to the watch later list. If I refresh the page, it's still gonna be in the watch later list, because this information is stored in the browser cookie. So that was headers and cookies, but we're not finished yet. We've got one last Next.js server function to cover, previewData. Preview mode is a Next.js concept that enables you to preview your work in progress drafts. In our case, let's say we have a work in progress video we want to include on our page, and we want to see what it's going to look like in the main page. The first step is to set the preview data, and we can do that in the API routes. This is nothing new and has been in Next.js for a while, so we're gonna create a request handler, we're gonna fetch the videos, and we're gonna include the include preview true flag to include the work in progress videos. We're gonna set preview data and we're gonna set the videos. Then we're gonna redirect the user to the home page, and we're gonna end the request. What is new is the preview data function that we're gonna import from Next headers. And then we're gonna grab preview videos from preview data. And finally, where we map over the videos, we're gonna set it to preview videos or videos, so that if preview videos are set, it's gonna be used instead of the videos variable. If we now visit the preview endpoint in the API routes, we are going to enter the preview mode, and you can see the work in progress video on the screen. To exit the preview mode, we can either clear the cookies and refresh the page, or you could implement another API route where you would call the clear preview data function on the response object. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content, and feedback of any kind is highly appreciated. With that, thank you so much for watching and take care. Bye.